Hello, everyone. My name is Zainab News, and I am the CEO and founder of Canadian production company Creatoland Inc. I'm excited to be moderating this panel. Yeah, welcome to the third edition of the Ottawa Black Film Festival, created by the Fabian Colas Foundation and supported by the Canadian Heritage, Canada Media Fund, the Ontario Arts Council, Le Droit, and Festwave Institute. OPFF 2023 is taking place from March 24th to 26th, 2023, online and in person. You can find the complete program and grab your online all access pass and individual tickets via the website ottawablackfilm.com. So thank you all for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation as a film producer. It's one I wished I had access to when I was starting out my production company. So before we begin, I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial. We are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. And now we can talk a little bit more about this panel. The objective is to provide valuable information to filmmakers, especially film producers that are considering and or in the process of incorporating their production company. This is important because opening a production company can sometimes be both an emotional and financial investment for many people who want to become producers and those that wish to retain ownership and an active voice in the execution of their own projects. In the Canadian industry, most funding programs require that the applicant company must be incorporated, sometimes for at least 1 year. And getting incorporated is a decision that requires research and access to valuable information. So, some questions that film producers often ask will include: is this the right time to do it? Which, meaning incorporate. And what are the requirements to know? Most importantly, how much is it going to cost? And how does one sustain a corporation? And with a variety of information available online, it might be challenging to understand the intricacies and subtleties of incorporating. And so this panel will offer people additional information to consider during the process of incorporating a production company and some of the necessary steps to take. So thank you for being here. I know that was a lot to just sort of describe this panel, but I know it's an important conversation and one that we really had to set the context for. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Christina. Hi, Christina. Christina is the senior manager at Dale Matheson, Carr Hilton, Levante LLP, based out of the Victoria office. She joined the entertainment team in 2016 and specializes in providing accounting, taxation, and business management services to a variety of clients in the entertainment industry. Christina is proud to work with a diverse portfolio of clients, including bands and actors, and she currently volunteers with the Tegan and Sarah Foundation. When she's not at the office, Christina loves playing sports, attending concerts, or exploring in her camper van. That's exciting. Thanks, Christina. Our second panelist is John Nice, CEO and producer of Nice Image Productions. John is the CEO of the company. He's a film producer living in Ottawa, Ontario. He specializes in cinematography and has earned a reputation for his expertise in filmmaking. His recent projects include working with local filmmakers on documentaries, series, and feature films. Welcome, John. Perfect. Laden Ali is our next panelist. Laden is currently the coordinator of Mentorship, International Development and Policy at the Canadian Media Producers Association, which is a CMPA. Laden is, her role exclusively works with emerging producers to match them with established producers to receive one-on-one training across a production timeline from development to post-production in genres ranging from drama to documentary. Ladan is also a poet and a stand-up comedian. In 2021, she was a finalist at an online comedy competition and continues to perform at Comedy Club Yuck Yucks. She's now focusing on writing her own scripted and unscripted projects. Welcome, Ladan. Yes. And then we've got Miro. Miro Bala is a partner at Taylor Bala Murray Leyland LLP. He has been practicing entertainment law since 2002 in the areas of music, film, television, gaming, new media, sports, and event production. He currently sits on the boards of the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, Advance, so Canada's Black Music Collective, the Polaris Music Prize, and the Canadian Live Music Association. So, hi, Miro. How are you? So let's get started with some questions. Now that everyone knows who the panelists are, I'd like to ask you each a question to get us started, to just get a better sense for how you work, who you are, and the role that you occupy. So Christina, I'll start with you. Could you briefly describe the client journey and experience of film producers that approach your accounting firm to request a service? How do you make this process, equitable and inclusive for producers that identify with one or more historically marginalized communities?
Hi, everyone. I would say that most people come out to us through referrals or through the website, and they'll get directed to our admin or our partner. They can also reach out to, any one of the senior managers or partners, because we all have profiles on the website. And then we just usually ask them a little bit about themselves and what they're kind of looking for. A lot of the times, what we find is people just have questions, and we're always happy to answer questions, even if they don't say take us on, or if we don't have a relationship with them down the road. We're always willing to help people with questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Christina. Yeah, that's really important to know the process there. So it's mostly through the website, you said, and word of mouth, referral. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Christina. John, my next question is for you. Could you briefly describe Nice Image Productions, some of the projects you support? How do you promote equity and inclusion through projects you develop at your company?
Okay, so at Nice Image Production, it's a video production company here in Ottawa. So there's three brothers. So it's me, my twin, and my oldest one. We decided to open a video production company here. And so what happened is the reason why we opened Nice Image Productions, because we wanted to have like other artists also to fit into a production company as well. And so our main focus is to have artists who wants to feel safe as well, and who wants to utilize the space as well. Because what happens is, like, when I used to do video production before, and just to get a space to do my video production wasn't that easy. So because of that, I decided to just open up a space, because I know there's artists out there who actually wants a space where they can create, they can feel safe. And what we actually ended up doing here at the Studio for Set, and that was like 2 months ago, we had a festival where we invite all the local filmmaker. And we actually had the first series, which was actually done at this studio. And yep, so it's almost like just have a space where everybody's welcome, so we can support them and they can showcase to their family and friend, and so they can just feel safe.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Yeah, no, I've been a fan of your company for some time now, and I've rented space from you guys. So I'm really happy that you exist in the city of Ottawa. Okay, so thanks, John. We're going to move on to Ladan. And am I pronouncing your name well, Ladan?
Yeah, Ladan. It's perfect.
Okay. Perfect. So Ladan, could you briefly describe your role with the CMPA? How does the CMPA provide access to educational resources and support to producers of all levels, from emerging to established?
Okay, I would love to do that. Also, nice to see you, John. I've been at your studio before. It's amazing. It's a wonderful experience. I'm gonna have to say that it was a serendipitous moment getting this job in the first place. I was tired of the corporate world. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend. So I decided to quit my job in this last summer. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I don't know. We'll do comedy forever. So I ended up applying for a script writing program. At the same time, I applied for the CMPA position, which I got. And I can say one thing, we're going to talk about this a little later. Incorporation is important. Everything, just to be able to apply for the CMPA, you have to be, as a member, you have to be incorporated. So the CMPA is a collective of production companies throughout Canada. So it ranges from one people, like it could be a one person team to up to 20 plus. So yeah, incorporation is important. And I want to get back to the BIPOC question you asked earlier. The CMPA is wonderful for facilitating the change to have more storytellers be able to produce their own work. So the CMPA represents production companies like you, like John. So they want to do what you like. They provide the services that you think we need in Canada, and of course, that is facilitating more access to BIPOC communities. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I think they're doing great things. And yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm guessing, there's some producers that are listening to this panel, and I think it'd be important to know how they can access the CMPA and the resources that the CMPA offers to producers of all levels. So thanks so much for sharing that info to us, Ladan. And then, yeah, we'll move on to Miro. Miro, could you briefly describe, very similar to Christina's question, the client journey and experience of film producers that approach your entertainment law firm to request a service? How do you make this process equitable and inclusive for producers that identify with one or more historically marginalized communities?
For sure. Yeah. First of all, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me. One of the biggest challenges I think we find is there's a barrier, there's an intimidation level barrier, right? I think whenever people are dealing with, somebody that's, in the professional industry, and especially lawyers, we don't have the best reputation all the time. There's just this level of, I don't know, intimidation, fear, worry, however, anxiety, however you word it, about engaging in that process, right? People hear that it's something that they have to do, but they don't necessarily know what it involves. So, for me particularly, it's making people feel comfortable with that situation, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people who are often more creative minded than business minded. Sometimes people have both, but they didn't go to law school, they're not planning to. So I try and make the initial conversation and just generally the entire experience as helpful as possible, like not get it bogged down in legalese, and try and talk to the other person as another human being and figure out, okay, what exactly do they need? Like, what is it that they need that's going to help them in their journey to get to where they're going, right? So I think that's kind of my global holistic approach to the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, yeah, like the legal process, particularly for film producers that are trying to understand contractual agreements, I think it can feel intimidating. So the fact that you're always supporting through that process to make it accessible is important. But so thank you all for providing a bit more context into the work that you do. I'd now like to move to some general questions for all of you on the panel. So my first question is, in your opinion, when is the right time for filmmakers, particularly producers, to consider incorporating their film company or the production company? So maybe I'll start with John on this one.
So what happened? So I've been doing production for the past 10 years. I went to school in multimedia, and so what happened is I used to do a lot of event. It was more like they hire me and I go shoot, more of a contractor. And so what happened when I happened to have the space and the nice image space like studio for set, and then I start thinking like how do I make this like more like to have like more people to have access to it, so I can get like more more bigger contract, like government contract, like the city of Ottawa, and also commercial, and especially when I was getting into film. And so I decided to like, okay, you know what? Once I acquire space, I'm just going to incorporate the business. And it wasn't easy because I had to do a lot of research, because anybody knows when you incorporate your business, you have to make sure you have to file your taxes, your business have to be registered, you have to make sure also like you have insurance as well. So those were very new to me. I thought it was just like go ahead and incorporate your business. But when I happened to get in touch with one of my friend who is actually a lawyer, he was able to walk me through like what tools I need, what I need to do, what insurance I have to get. So in a sense, it is expensive, but I had no choice. But I did see the benefit of doing that, because what happens like after I incorporated my business, I start getting like most clients like contact me, and someone said they also check in and say like, is your business registered? So it was kind of like it was a benefit for me by doing that. So the only thing is it's more of a headache, because when it comes to taxes, there's a lot of paperwork, So it's like, and when you don't have someone who take care of that, like you have no choice to learn how to do it. Yeah. So
Yeah, really good point, John.
mm.
Out of curiosity, so from your experience, when would you say is the right time for producers to incorporate?
Yeah, I would say like as a producer, because so here's the thing. I just finished doing a series. Like I was a producer, and then shout out to Deidre. She just finished her first Black series here in Ottawa. And it was more of like trying to use a production company which is incorporated, and which actually own the copyright of everything, and versus just come in as a like you don't even have a business, you're just going to film. So it was a lot easy in terms of like, let's say we want to get a location, we will get that location under the business. So let's say we want to sign something, everything was done in the business, and it was just kind of like more more better in the front end, and versus like don't even know who you are, because once you incorporate your business, you have the address, they check everything, it makes all the process so easy. Because what happened before, when let's say I want to endorse a film, it was kind of hard on my end, because like let's say you go on the paper, it says your business have to be incorporated, and I didn't meet the condition. It was just like I say, okay, you know what, even though it's a headache, given the fact we are going into the film business, it is a time for us to just incorporate it, just so we can have more control on what we're doing. And also it does create more like an open opportunity, like we are serious as well, especially being in the film business, I would say.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really good point. So you're saying to streamline the production process, sometimes it's easier and better to incorporate.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. Thanks, John. Christina, what do you think? When is the right time for producers to incorporate? I'm curious.
From my perspective, it's obviously based on the tax side. For us as business managers, there's tax, liability reasons, and then also like funding. But from the tax side, generally we tell people, only incorporate when you're making enough money where you're making more money than you actually need. Because if you incorporate a business on the tax side, just looking at the tax reasons, if you incorporate and make all that money in the corporation, and then you need all that money to live, there's no tax advantage. So you incorporate, you spend money to set up a company essentially, then you pay corporate taxes, flow, and if say the net money in the corporation is everything that you need to personally survive, then you have to flow that all out to you on a personal level, and then you pay personal taxes on that money that you take out of the corporation. So just from looking at it singularly from the tax perspective, we tell people that, barring other factors, until you're making more money than you actually need, that's what we kind of look at.
That's a really good point. Out of curiosity, isn't there an amount that once you make as as a company or as a business, you're forced to incorporate? Isn't there a set amount?
No, there's no set amount. I mean, in Canada, there's a small business deduction. You get $500,000 of net income that you get taxed at a lower corporate rate. So generally, especially with artists and producers, there's a lot of things that you can write off. You know, your life is your business. So there's only certain things that you can't that claim as a business expense. So, you know, there's a lot of things that you can run through the company, which make your draws and your personal expenses much less. So if you take out everything, you know, that you just can't write off, say like, you know, a portion of your rent or your mortgage or whatever, and then you have an excess, then it would make sense to incorporate, because the marginal tax rates for a person are much higher than the corporate tax rates that you would be taxed on.
Okay. No, this is really helpful to know. And yeah, I think we'll get back to it too, but at some point during the panel. But I was curious about maybe the set amount you needed to make was for getting an HST number, right? Like, isn't there an amount you have to make? And how does the HST number connect with being incorporated? Can you have an HST number without being incorporated? Yeah.
Yep, totally. So the HST is once you make $30,000 gross, so before any expenses, and that's in any 12-month period, you have to register for HST. And that goes for both corporate and personal. So you can have an HST number personally that's linked to your SIN, and you can have a HST number that's linked to your business number of your corporation. Usually people that start out, you know, once they make $30,000, if they're not incorporated yet, they register for HST. They file their HST returns either quarterly or annually with their personal tax return. And then once they incorporate and all of their income flows through the company, they can close their personal HST account because that's no longer needed.
Okay, no, that's very helpful information. I know a lot of folks are, yeah, you know, at what point do you incorporate, especially if you're running things through your personal, yeah, like you said, just personal accounting. How do you when is the right time to make that shift towards incorporating?
Yeah, the CRA is actually usually for personal taxes. We only report once a year when you file your personal annual returns. And the CRA is generally pretty lenient in that if, say, someone reports their 2022 income now and their gross business income is over the $30,000 mark, and then you go and then you register, they're not going to make you go back and pay HST. But say you consistently earn over the $30,000 mark, they can go back and force you to pay the HST that you should have collected on your income. But if you're proactive, they usually don't come after you.
Okay, perfect. No, good to know. Good to know. Okay, but then how about you? When do you think is the right time? I know you can also bring in the CMPA context as well.
Hey, so for me, I speak directly to emerging producers. I don't know the technical details that like Christina, John, or Myra will be bringing on, but I do speak on the fact that I noticed working at this company that incorporating is important. It's needed, but I also wanted to speak about the resources before we incorporate. So I'll speak for like my point of view. I'm also an emerging producer, correct? And it's very daunting to speak with lawyers. I was nervous to be on this call with accountants and lawyers and producers. But I feel like, especially in the BIPOC and the Black community in Ottawa, we need to understand who we can connect to first before we give up on our dreams. I don't want to talk about dreams right now because I think people want to know like the technical information and they want to produce. So I think the important thing too is to get the context. So even within the CMPA website, I know I'm repping CMPA really hard, but within our website, we do have a Star Producers program where they do have banking for producers webinars free for anyone to check out. So there's like there's 3 modules to this. The third one will be happening next week, March 28th. So the first presentation is run by Nia Nguyen. He's a business affairs lawyer at Blue Ant Media. So he just gives emerging producers a rundown on the importance of incorporating, the importance of interfinancing, anything you need to know as an emerging producer. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend this. I'm just doing it, like I'm speaking to my brothers and sisters who are new in the game to like know your stuff, not to be intimidated. I'm learning not to be intimidated. I'm showing up as well. So I'm learning, I'm getting the context, I'm getting the cards. I showed up here and I'm one of the only Black people in this company and I'm doing it. And I think the only way to do it is to not be intimidated and to get the context, to actually do the research. As John was mentioning, it's not easy because you went through it. I didn't go through it, so I don't know. But I know just watching the presentations itself is super daunting to process. So for me, my advice would be to do the research, connect with those professionals like Myro, sorry, I hope I'm saying that correctly. And yeah, not to give up. I'm also in the process of incorporating myself. So I know it's just connecting, not giving up, sticking it out with your peers. And yeah, I do believe it's a really, really, really important thing for the BIPOC community to not get overwhelmed by how crazy it is. And also, it's not really, we have to remember that there was a lot of barriers in the first place. It's not like a lot of us think it's, oh my God, it's my own issue. I can't do it. It's too hard. It's complicated. Yes, it's complicated. That's why there are professionals like Christina and Myro. But also, a lot of this stems from systemic barrier. And the CMPA recognizes that there are systemic barriers for access. And I think they're trying their hardest to reconcile it, but it also we need to take advantage of the opportunities. And I do believe there are a lot of opportunities right now. And yeah, so that's my spiel. I am speaking to my emerging producers right now. So
thank you so much, Laden. No, it's very helpful info because it is daunting. And so, but the only way to sort of tackle it is to go all the way in and just be confident that you can find your way through and you meet people like the Christinas and like the Mayros and you hopefully get that guidance. But yeah, but speaking of, are we pronouncing your name correctly though? Miro or Myro?
Yeah, it's Miro.
Okay. Miro, yeah, I guess the question is for you, from your experience and from what you've seen with clients, when is the right time for producers to incorporate their production company?
Okay. So kind of echoing a little bit on what Christina was saying, there's different layers for incorporation, right? Like she said, sometimes people incorporate for tax reasons because they're making enough money that they want to pay less tax, and it's worth sheltering some in the company, taking advantage of that small business tax credit. Other times you incorporate because you need to access some grants, right? Maybe the stuff with a CMPA or telefilm or what have you. All those companies may require to be incorporated. So even if you're not making that much money, but you want to access the grant, you don't have much of a choice. And sometimes that happens. We work with clients who come to us and say, hey, we got a grant. I've got a grant to do a documentary. I got a grant to do a short film, but I need to have an incorporated company, right? The other reason people incorporate sometimes is for legal liability, right? I think the one thing we haven't talked about a corporation is that legally, a corporation is a completely distinct person. And it's weird to use the word person when you talk about a thing that's a human fiction, but legally it is a distinct person from you, right? So if something happens in the company, there's a problem, there's a lawsuit, you don't have to worry about losing your personal assets, right? Your personal assets and the assets of the company are two entirely different things. So, that becomes useful when you start dealing with, when you're doing a lot of contracts with people. If you're doing event production, for example, right? You would never want to have people who do event production and don't have their own companies. To me, that's a situation where on the legal side, that's the priority. Because if you have an event and something happens, hopefully your insurance sorts it out. But if not, you don't want your own personal assets there at play, right? So sort of each situation, what I'm trying to get across is that depending on what you're doing and your circumstance, when you want to incorporate may be triggered by one of those different things, and that will happen at a different time necessarily, right? It's not like every time once you're doing a business for 6 months, you got to get incorporated, you know. And to Ladan's point, now I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
I've heard it all. Ladan, Ladane, Ladan. I'm good with all of them.
No, but what's the correct one?
Ladan's correct.
Ladan? Okay. To Ladan's point, you know, there are barriers. It's not barriers of, you know, necessarily keeping obscured, but it's not an easy thing to necessarily wrap your head around. You know, there are links, both the Ontario government website and the Canadian government website provide information on incorporation. And, you know, like I said, to your point, let's not have intimidation or worry be the thing that stops you from exploring those things and learning, because without taking that leap, what you're doing is you're essentially placing a ceiling on yourself in terms of how effective your business can be, because so much of this, you know, there are so many programs now in place, whether it's in music or film, the TV, of government money, right? And especially now of government money that's being, you know, sort of sequestered and targeted for BIPOC individuals and BIPOC businesses. But it's much harder to access that stuff if you're not incorporated. So that, you know, no sense in putting a ceiling on yourself when what we're trying to do is break through ceilings, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And I think you sort of raised a really good point about just separating yourself from your business by incorporating, because legally then you become two entities, right? And then you can protect yourself. No, that's a really good point. And I remember that was advice I got that really influenced us as a company a couple years ago. So yeah, thank you for raising that, Mira. And speaking of funding, that was my next question to the panel. So maybe Mira, you could start us off with a response to this question. Should funding programs continue to make being incorporated a requirement for producers seeking funding to support their projects? You know, you can explain why or why not you feel funding programs should make this a requirement.
It's a tough one, right? You know, honestly, I'm probably of two minds of it, right? On the one hand, there's to what we were just discussing earlier, that creates an extra level of threshold, an extra barrier that for people who may already have felt marginalized or on the outside, this is just one more thing of like, oh, I don't know how to do this. How do you know, I don't know anybody who has a company. How am I gonna get this done, right? So that part isn't ideal. But I also like the idea of having a threshold, having something that says, look, do you really want to do this? Like, and at the end of the day, you're getting free money, right? You know, so it's like, how invested are you? And where the instances I've seen where it's worked the best is where there's a requirement for incorporation, but it's not just like in the grant application, it just doesn't say must be incorporated and then that's it, right? Where as part of it's got a link where you're being provided with the resources to and the tools to, you know, meet that threshold. I think that's the approach that I like the best, where it's still like, this is something you have to do because it actually makes sense for you to do it. It makes sense, probably, you know, there's probably an element of liability protection for the funder as well, why they want to do it that way. And, you know, that's all reasonable. But where they're providing those resources, right? You know, you'd mentioned that the CMPA has those resources, and where other funders provide those resources alongside with the requirement, you know, that's something that I'm for.
That's a really good point. That it's also a way for funders to feel a sense of yeah, to just reduce the rest, right, from their end. Christina, what do you think? Should funding programs continue to make being incorporated a requirement for producers? Yeah, I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, sorry. I kind of feel similarly to Miro in that, you know, it could be seen as good and bad, you know, like unless someone's really serious about it, you know, maybe they won't access that funding. However, you know, it puts extra barriers on people. So now you have to incorporate a company. You need the money to first fund the incorporation costs and to start this and to learn about a whole nother side of running a business. So, I mean, I see it from both ways. I think that funding could help people that are not incorporated, that are just beginning. But at the same time, there are, other liability issues.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a point about accessibility, right? So there are eligible producers or projects that would benefit from that funding, but because of not being incorporated, or maybe to Mira's point, not having access to companies that are, they are automatically unqualified, right, for this funding. So is there a way that funders can make this process a little bit more accessible, easier? Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, Laden, what do you think?
I think I'm gonna follow on what Myra and Christina were saying. The social justice activist in me says no barriers, nothing. We all get money, we all perform, we get to do what we want to do. But the artist and the film snob in me likes the barriers, because we continue to create great arts if people who really want to do this are going after it and are incorporating and doing the background work, and it's complicated, right? And I also believe there is room, it's nuanced, right? There's room for, like, for example, for marginalized communities, maybe create something where it's separate. I know it's also, people can call that unfair for the rest of the population, but it's complicated. And I think we have to realize, like, what is the objective of it all? If it's profit, then yes, incorporation is important. But if it's equality and making things more fair throughout the society, then I do believe there should be like a third alternative. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good comment about fairness, right? If what's the objective? Is it and that will determine what the requirements should be. But yeah, really good points, Ladan. John, what do you think? Should funding programs make incorporating your production company a requirement?
For me, I look in both my voice. Oh my goodness, I look in both side. A part of me, it's almost like you want to put yourself in a position like you have the business experience. It's always hard, especially being as an artist, where we don't get to have the experience in business. So if you put yourself in a position, you learn the business side, which it takes a lot to actually learn the business side. We so focus on like we're going to create, and I'm so happy we actually have Mero and Christine who able to explain us like how to do things in the proper way. Because something will happen, it's almost like just to have access to someone like Miro and Christine, it's hard because you're gonna pay a fee. So having like this panel discussion is kind of like it's a free information for us as well. It's almost like you put yourself in a position as a producer, and then you ended up opening up your own company, and then as you keep going years and years, you also getting the experience, and having the experience. And for me, it does make sense for them to fund those incorporate businesses, because I don't think just going to go there and just give money there and there. You kind of have to understand the business side to see how you can integrate that in your own business, and how you can spray those money, because like there's a budget Excel where you have to explain and articulate and justify how you allocate your money. And it's all take like for you having to learn that, versus just taking the money and you just like put that whole chunk of money in one basket. So for me, it's almost like I like to think like I think it is important for us, especially like BIPOC, for us to put ourselves in a position to also understand the business side, how we can spread those funding, and it's going to put us more in a better situation and stable, and how we can continue moving our sort of artistic side forward with having a business mindset, I would say.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. Yeah, for sharing that. Really well said. I think, yeah, at the end of the day, right, it's just learning as much as we can to sort of understand the system, right, to get more money to support our projects. But John, my next question is for you. So, what were the lessons you learned when you were incorporating? Like, what was something that you felt maybe you didn't see online, information that you found only when you started the process of
Yes,
incorporating it?
for me it's a bit tricky. So I live in the world. Like I tend to risk a lot of my. I'll be like, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and incorporate the business. Like I don't know what the tools are. I don't know what I need. And they're like in 3 months, oh, you have to file your taxes. I'm like, what do you mean I have to file my taxes? And to answer to, I know Christine mentioned that it's almost like when you make less than $30,000, you don't have to. But when my business like income changed, it's almost like I didn't have a choice. Like, you know what, I'm just going to go through it. I'm just going to incorporate it. And then I noticed like there's a lot that's involved in regard to that, even when you hire an employee as well, you know? So there's like a few things. It's almost like you have to like pause, and you have to make sure you reach the right person to provide those help to you. And so I had to like pause for a second and try to like look someone who knows how to do taxes. I had to get in touch with them, someone who knows how, like, let's say you hire someone, like, what is the process when you hire someone full time? So I'm still in the process of learning that, but I say to myself, you know what, I might as well, if I'm not good at something, I might as well just dedicate that to someone else. So it's almost like we find ourselves, we just split the work here in the production. Like, let's say someone is good at that side, we just like, you know what, you focus on that. Because I hate to say this, I don't like to put myself in a situation like I'm not an expert, and because I might find myself like I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. So it's almost like I like to play like very like careful. It's almost like, you know what, since this side, like let's say taxes stuff, it's not my expertise, I'm just going to hire someone who is professional who can just take care of it. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Yeah, no, that's an important part of the process, is always working with people who understand the things that you don't,
Hmm.
right? And it just makes it easier for you. But yeah, no, I'll move on to Ladan. Ladan, I'm curious, what are the resources that the CMPA offers to producers when it comes to the business side of filmmaking, which is what we're discussing, right? Like
Yeah.
incorporating, all of the less creative side of the business of filmmaking. I'm curious, what are these resources and how can we access them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've working with the CMPA, I realized their main goal is to do the stuff that the creatives don't want to do. It's so we have the business affairs team, just a full-on team that works with the business affairs section. We have in-house lawyers who advise members about their do all the lawyering for the creatives. We also have an industrial relations team that deals with. I'm not sure if anyone has been keeping up with Bill C-11, which will be impacting producing in Canada. So we have all these various departments that do all the thinking, I guess, for produce members. And there are some members who take full advantage of it so they can work fully, like focus on their art. We had a member whose their documentary was nominated for an Oscar, and they would always come to us and like have all these million questions, minute questions. They also hired mentors from us. So it depends how you want to work. But so because some people don't really take advantage of it, some people take full advantage of every single thing that the CNP has to offer, which is amazing. Why? Like John said, if there's a professional who knows what they're doing, let them do it and focus on your art. So I hope I answered your question, but the CNPA does have detailed branches who take care of every little like minute thing about the world of producing in Canada. So, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful info to know. So anything, basically the things the producers don't want to tackle, the CMPA can support them with it. Okay,
They take it all. I've seen it all.
good to know. Christina, out of curiosity, what is that one question you get a lot from clients when it comes to any tax considerations or accounting considerations when they are in the process of incorporating or even after they've incorporated? What's that popular question you always get? I'm curious.
Um, it's one or the other. We find that a lot of people, if we work with them just like on an annual basis, they're not business management. We just kind of do personal taxes or corporate taxes. For the personal side, usually they'll just come to us and say, guess what? I incorporated. And we're like, oh, okay. The way that you have to, I guess, take care of your business differs a lot from being a sole proprietor and having a corporation. And a lot of people, I would say, jump in and don't really know what they need to do necessarily. So a lot of times, what we always try to tell our clients is like, let's be proactive. We're on your team. You know, even if you're just a personal tax client or a corporate client, like let us know what's coming down the pipeline for you. We're here to support you and help you and answer the questions that might lead you on the right path. Because, you know, for even just like bookkeeping, you know, that's a one small aspect of the business. The way that you bookkeep as a sole proprietor is completely different from the way that you bookkeep for your corporation. You know, so just knowing what you need to handle, I think, is really important for people before they jump in.
Yeah, no, really good point. Yeah, I think that's it. Just access to information that's required when it comes to going through this process, but particularly on the accountant side, or like you said, just the general business management side. Mira, same question for you. I want to know what's that, you know, question or something that that you hear or you see so often when producers are in that process of incorporating, um, that maybe you can share with us. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, kind of similar to Christina, I think I would always say if you're gonna do it, I would rather you come talk to me first before you incorporate than just incorporating and being like, hey, I incorporated. And a couple reasons for that. Firstly, you know, most of the time when people incorporate online, um, unless they really kind of know what they're doing, they may incorporate the company, but what they won't do is do what's called organizing the company, right? And you know, one of the ways to think about a company, it's the separate legal entity, but it's kind of like a robot. Like you need to program it, and the way you program it, you know, with legal pieces of paper, like resolutions, so like the bylaws or the director resolutions that appoint the directors, that set out the share certificates, all of those kind of things, right? And while that stuff, you know, may not change your life right away in the beginning, like if you where you're like, oh, I just need to be incorporated to qualify for this funding. But where it becomes problematic is kind of later on, whenever you need to do anything with that company. If somebody else, if you now need an investor in the company or anything, or you've got some stuff you're trying to sell or whatever, it's at that point where if your corporate organization and your minute books are a mess because you haven't been doing that stuff properly, then it becomes that much, it's much more expensive to go and fix it retroactively than, because then you're not just, it's not just the fixing, you got to pay somebody to look through everything and figure out what's right and what's wrong. Then if you just kind of did it in the beginning, you know, you got a lawyer to incorporate. And it's the difference between you doing it yourself and the difference, you know, I think our fees in it on an incorporation are $950. So it's like, you know, it's more than, I think if you do it yourself, the disbursements are $500. So, you know, it's going to cost you roughly another $1,000 to do it, but you get it's like you get the resolutions, you get the whole kind of package, the share certificates. There's also sometimes if it's a company with more than one person in it, right? Because not every company is just a single shareholder company. A single shareholder company means I'm the only person who owns the shares of that company. I'm likely the only director of the company. It's just my company. But sometimes, a lot of times, you're like, I'm going to go into business with my friend or this other person, like John was saying. So maybe you want to have 2 or 3 people as part of your business, part of your company, that are shareholders because they all know how to do different things, right? And in those situations, just having one class of common shares may not be the smartest way to do things. So, you know, again, that's where having somebody to kind of go over that stuff with you beforehand that can ask you the right questions, because you may not know, you know, if it's like that saying, it's like the first thing is you need to know what questions to ask before you can get the right answers, right? And if you don't know the questions, you need somebody to kind of help ask them those questions for you. So yeah, that would be my kind of spiel around the early stages of incorporating is yeah, you can do it yourself, but if you're going to really think about it, and if you're doing something that's not a single shareholder company, you should definitely talk to a lawyer. And even if it is a single shareholder company, understand that if you're going to do it yourself, that also means that you need to do the rest of it. It's not just, hey, I got my certificate from, Ontario corporations and now everything's sorted out.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mira. And that was my question. My next question for you was, um, what is, because I would assume it's easier if you're the sole owner and director and shareholder of this corporation. Um, and so, yeah, like, what is that? Is the process, is your advice still the same for, a single shareholder company as plus a company that, maybe has multiple shareholders? Is the advice still the same? Like, organize, make sure you're aware of what you need to do with this corporation. I'm just curious because, yeah, I know of a lot of independent producers that will incorporate and be the sole director of a company. I want to know if it's the same advice you would give them, right? If say compared to other people who go in a partnership or in a
It's
multiple
yeah, it's definitely
shareholder
less
structure.
complex in the single one, right? In the single one, like I said, I mean, I think I'm not so mad at you if you're doing it yourself, as long as you also recognize that you need to do more than just do the incorporation. And if and there's lots of resources for online resolutions and things like that. And if you look at those and you feel comfortable that they're correct for your company, go for it. Um, but if it's a company with more than one person, there in that situation, I always highly recommend that you also, in addition to getting the company incorporated, that you think about doing a shareholder agreement. Because without a shareholder agreement, if there's ever a falling out between the two partners in the company, that's what makes it real difficult. It also doesn't, without a shareholder agreement, nothing really prevents one person from transferring their shares to somebody else completely that the other shareholder may not have wanted to work with at all. So there's a lot of reasons why once you're in a multi-party situation, the layers get a little thicker, right? So it's there's more layers to it than just, hey, we've got this company, because now you're actively in business with somebody else, and it makes sense to have some kind of documentation that sets out how you're going to be in business, and also, equally importantly, what happens when you decide you don't want to be in business anymore.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful to know. And you spoke about the services that you offer producers through your firm when it comes to incorporating. Is this consistent annually? Can they come back when they have to file a return? What is that? Yeah, maybe talk a little bit more about
Yeah.
what you offer
Yeah,
when you incorporate it.
we start in the beginning where we can do the incorporation, we can do your organizing resolutions, your shareholder agreement, if it's a multi-party company and that's something you want, and then you can just opt into, every year we file your annual resolution, so you're not on default there. And it's more important to do that if you're incorporating a federal company, because like Government Canada will actually just cancel your corporation if you don't do your annual returns. And the Ontario incorporations, they won't necessarily cancel you. They could, but they don't really do it as much. So we'll do all that. We'll do all that stuff. We'll liaise, Christina, you and I have some clients in common, and we'll call Christina, like our corporate clerk will, email Christina and say, hey, have you guys, done the tax filings when this and whatever. They'll send us, if there was dividends declared, or what, all these elements that we need to put in the resolutions. We do the resolutions, we do the filings, it goes in the minute book, and everything is kind of organized. And that stuff, like I said, helps down the line when, if we're looking at this, it's kind of a journey, right? You start off, you're an independent producer, you make your first thing, you hopefully it was great, it goes really well, you're doing another project, so now you may have a few companies because you've done these single purpose entities, one for each of these or one for each of these films. Maybe at some point now, you've got enough of a track record, and another company wants to invest in you or wants to partner with you, maybe like a Lionsgate or somebody like that, right? In order for them to do that and pass all their due diligence requirements, they can't do that if your back end is a total mess, right? So even though they may appreciate the talent and may want to work with you, they'll be stopped from doing so further in a certain way if your corporate structure isn't cleaned up, right? So and you're better off just kind of annually maintaining it than trying to clean up 12 years worth of corporate stuff at once.
Yeah, no, thank you for explaining that a little bit more. I think, yeah, this is very helpful. Even I'm learning, so I'm sure there are a lot of people who are listening that are getting, yeah, a lot of information from this conversation. Um, John, my next question was for you. Has there been any project that your production company has funded solely because you were incorporated? I think that'll be fun to just share a bit more, yeah,
Yes.
a bit more of an anecdote about,
Yes.
that process.
Yeah. So what happened is what we usually do, it's like, let's say we made X amount of dollar in the business, and we take a percentage, and we take that percentage, we put it more like into filmmaking. So we had to invest our own funding. Everybody knows, like, before you can actually get funding, and you have to show that you can create like that. That's how it is as an artist. They're not just going to give you money to you because you have a passion. I can create it. They have to see something. So what we do is that the X amount of money we make, we took a percentage and we put it toward a series. So that was actually last year. So we spent 6 months, 6 episodes, and we just decided, like, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and just fund this series. And it's going to be a new series here, like in Ottawa, a black film series. There's a lot of documentary that's being done here in Ottawa. So it was kind of like a race, you know what, let's just do a series where we can showcase Ottawa city and just create a story narrative from there. So it was very successful. It wasn't easy because when you're trying to maintain that and making sure everybody's getting paid, the actor, the crew, and everything. Everybody knows, like, as a filmmaker, it's almost like you don't want to put yourself in the hole. You want to make put yourself in a situation you're stable, and versus you just give money. So it's almost like we have to put everything in place, the structure, and making sure that each month when we work, we take a percentage and we jump into production. So for me, that was very rewarded by doing that. Like, we ended up learning a lot on the filmmaking process. And so yeah, so that was actually one of the biggest thing that we did last year, like putting yourself in a position, you know what, we're just going to take X amount of money, put into a film, and then we can use that as a tax credit as well. So let's say if we file our taxes, we can just justify it's almost like, oh, this went toward a film. So you're just trying to find a way so you don't have to pay a lot of taxes and for this year. So it was kind of like, you know what, let's just use film to use it as a tax credit. Yes.
Um, that is
Yeah.
very interesting. I'm gonna
Yeah.
let Christina share her thoughts on. Christina, what do you think about that strategy for a business?
I think that it's smart in that you're reinvesting in yourself. You know, corporations can kind of be seen like as their tax shelter. So, like for your personal self. So say you get a big grant, and it's a bunch of money that you wouldn't need to live on for a year. The way that a corporation works is that you can spread out your personal earnings over many years, and then you're taxed at the lower corporate rate. For you to reinvest in your own company and to be, producing more, I think that's smart. You're getting the tax write-off, you're not paying tax on that, and you're also building your portfolio. So I think that makes sense.
Okay, well, you have the approval of a business management
Thanks.
from there. That's good. Perfect, perfect. So then my next question was for you. Have you thought about incorporating as an independent producer, knowing that you're now interested in producing your own projects? Out, obviously being a part of CMPA, has that influenced you to want to be incorporated?
I for sure will be incorporating because monthly we get an email from our one of the managers of our membership manager. Sorry, I'm gonna pause on that and refresh. But so she constantly asks us, hey, do you want to be a member? And I spoke to her and she's like, you have to be incorporated. And I'm currently working on a project with Bell TV, but I also need to be incorporated. So I'm doing all the research, and I feel like I got super lucky working within the CMPA because I get the intel knowledge. It's not easy. John, any producer, Zainab, I believe you're a producer yourself. Not an easy feat. So yes, long story short, I will be incorporating, but I do believe it is important to get all the knowledge first. And I feel like I'm so lucky to hear about all the tax issues before, the tax man comes after me in 2 years, 3 years. So yeah, long story short, I will definitely be incorporating in order to continue producing. Yeah.
Perfect. No, I mean, yeah, I think it's really good to know that you're also interested in incorporating, and I think that would give a lot of confidence to producers that are thinking about it. So yeah, I know we can, start to wrap things up. I only have two questions left. My question is for everybody on the panel. I know we've been talking about benefits, maybe some misperceptions about incorporating. I think we can offer a balance. I'm curious, what's one downfall to incorporating your production company that maybe people don't talk about enough, right? I know we talked about all of the pros. I'm curious if there's a con we can, present to the panel.
I could speak on a con. I would say that the books have to be maintained much more strictly. When you're a sole proprietor, all you have to report are your income and expenses. When you have a corporation, you have to also maintain your balance sheet, which means it's all your assets, your liabilities, your equity, and your income and expenses. So that means if you have a corporate bank account, you have to reconcile your bank account at the end of your fiscal year. So you don't just get to track your income and expenses, you have to track every single dollar that goes in and out of that account. Same with if it's a corporate card. So there's definitely more bookkeeping costs if you don't do it yourself. You still have to file personal taxes. So you still have to do that. And then you also have to file a corporate return. So there's annual costs of just maintaining your corporation, annual maintenance that Miro talked about. Yeah, I would say there's just extra costs and more strict bookkeeping that needs to be done.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful because it's true, there's just so much more, yeah, documentation, more tracking, more monitoring, particularly on the financial side. So it's good to bring that into awareness for people of like, yeah, there's a lot to consider when you incorporate it. But thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
Yeah, who else wants to take this question?
Maybe I can go. So I would say also bookkeeping because there's three stakeholder. Like I said, it's me, my twin, and my older brother. We own the business. So in terms of, let's say they do expenses, we have to make sure they use the business bank account. So let's say they ended up using their own personal account. It's almost like this was an expense. No, that was not an expense. Can you justify that? So it's just a headache, like trying to like track everybody what they're doing in terms of like expenses, how much money it's coming in the account, and how much money it's leaving the account. So it can be very hectic and difficult. So I would say like the best thing to do is like just make sure you have the same account, and it's easy for you to track everything. So let's say if I have my own personal account, he has his own personal account, he goes to the expense, then it's so hard for us to justify that. So what we ended up doing, so I was like, you know what, to make everything so smooth and easy, just have one business account. It's easy for each key party to track and know what's being spent and what money it's been make, what money it's been spent. So let's say we present that to our account, like the bookkeeping, they can balance the whole thing, which tend to make sense like that.
Thank you, John. Yeah, no, and again, Christina, not to sort of put you out of business, but I'm curious, what is a software or resource for new producers that don't have, a lot of wiggle room financially to hire bookkeepers and accountants to support them in that first or that early stage when they're incorporated, what are some resources you can offer? And I wasn't sure if you also wanted to follow up what John had said, but yeah, I'll let you sort of share your thoughts.
I would say that there's some really good programs out there that are geared towards non-accountants. And we don't personally use those programs a lot because they aren't geared towards us, and there's a lot of functions that don't help us. However, if it's an owner-operated company, I think that there are a lot of accounting programs like QuickBooks, Wave, those programs connect to your business accounts and then allow you to just kind of track where, what kind of expenses is, what kind of income it is. It allows you to, have that you're registered for HST. So, 13% of this amount of money going into the bank account is HST. So it tracks everything for you. The biggest thing I would say with those is if you have someone in your life or if you have an accountant that you can reach out to, maybe just having some help setting up the books. But because sometimes what we've found is people, create way more accounts than they actually need. And then at the end of the year, it's just like overwhelming for everyone. And it costs way more for your accountant to do everything because it's just not streamlined. So, more or less accounts, more simple, I would say in the beginning is important when you're doing your own books. Another downfall I would say about incorporating is that because it is a separate entity, if you have a new corporation and you're applying for a credit card, the company has no credit. So you a lot of the times are, using your own personal credit. And then a lot of times what we've found is that you actually have to secure the credit card. So sometimes getting credit for a new company can be difficult for people.
That's really helpful information there. Thank you for that, Christina. I think it's a lot for a lot of people to consider. I think it's important to ask this question. Mira, what about you? What's a downfall you think you can share to producers?
Don't really have anything new to add. I think it's kind of already been covered. It's the cost. It's the complication of having another set of books to manage, paperwork to file, more brown envelopes from CRA that show up that tell you, it is another it is another entity that then is going to be looked at, right? So, theoretically it doubles your risk of getting audited. I'm just making that up, but it's a second thing that can potentially cause you headaches, right? But yeah, I think that's it. I think overall the costs outweigh the benefits, but it's not without, potential hassles.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Mira. Madan, how about you? What do you think? What's the downfall you can share?
The downfall is, again, the books. If you think about us in our, when we were 18, I'm personally reflecting on my youth when I first got all my credit cards. I think we have to factor in that this is real life. It's not like a personal credit card. You're affecting other people too, employees. It also will put a black mark on your, potential investments down the line. So I think you have to be very careful. And like Christina said, always think we should reach out to, every family member has an accountant. I believe that. I have two in my family. So I feel like it's important to reach out to people. I'm scared because of what I did with my shopping sprees in my youth, that I know you have to be super careful. And and I know a lot of our clients use QuickBooks. So I'm not even sure if they even have accountants. I don't know if it's connected with accountants. I'm learning a lot of new things, but I can only say, as for emerging producers and for myself, be prepared to manage everything and keep track. And it's nerve-wracking, but I think it's worth it, because to gain access in this world, you have to be part of the realm, right? So you have to figure out what you want in the end. And that's my spiel. Yeah.
Yeah, Christina, did you want to comment on that?
So QuickBooks is an accounting software. It's a bookkeeping software, basically. So it will compile, QuickBooks has a lot of functions, actually. It'll compile, your bookkeeping records. It allows you to create separate projects if you wanted to run, profit and loss statements for this one project. So it does have a lot of functions, but it won't file your taxes. You still have to complete your books, reconcile everything, and send it to an accountant. Or I guess you could try yourself. I've heard of no one filing a corporate return on their own. So usually it goes to an accountant. They'll ask for bank statements and stuff like that to make sure that the accounts are actually reconciled to the fiscal year end. But it is a good software. I would say if there's a lot of transactions, it would be a lot easier to do it through QuickBooks than to do it, say, through Excel yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Christina. And I realize that we're close to the end of this panel, and we haven't talked about a very important, process for filmmakers about when it comes to sole, purpose corporations, when they have, say, multiple projects on their slates, and say, they've got 2 or 3 films that have been greenlit, and now they have to go to production. So to your point, Mira, earlier about, separating these legal entities, what is your advice to filmmakers that do have to or are advised to create multiple SPCs, sole purpose corporations, for their film projects, so that they can protect themselves legally, and protect their own corporation, their parent corporation, legally as well? I just wanted to get you and Christina's thoughts, and John and then feel free to share your thoughts too.
Cool. Don't overdo it. Is mine. You don't need 9 corporations, right? Like you do if you're like Lionsgate or somebody like that, and you've got films that are making a bunch of money and you got to pay out. Because to my understanding, the major advantage of the single purpose entity is it creates one vehicle. So it's a lot easier in terms of like the revenue tracking, when you're like, oh, out of this project, maybe there's directors who have a back end, or actors who have a back end, or tax credit filings, all these things. It's all a lot easier if you've got a single company per project. I'm not sure, Christina, you're going to have to probably help me on this one. I'm not sure if for tax credit purposes you need to have a single purpose entity, or if you can just do it under one, because like we've just been saying, every new company is a little baby, right? So it's this little legal baby, when you got to feed the CRA, and you got to feed it's like another mouth you got to feed, right? It costs you money, and you don't want to have a bunch of these sad unattended corporate babies running around, at the end of the day. So do it if it makes sense. If you're starting out, you've got a bunch of projects that you're working on and developing, cool. But like, unless you get to a point where you've got projects where you're engaging with larger partners, or you've got a bunch of people on the back end to pay, where there's a real reason to get into the single purpose entity, that is the most advanced kind of form of doing this stuff. It's just unnecessary a lot of times for beginning producers. So
yeah, I agree with that. For once you're at that stage, I would say, where you're hiring accountants to do film tax credits, then you have single purpose entities. In the beginning stages, I would agree with Miro, keep it simple. And also people don't realize that with the CRA, you get $500,000 that is your small business deduction. If you own 4 companies, it doesn't mean you get $500,000 in each company. You get $500,000 at that small rate for all of your entities. So it doesn't help you in a tax perspective to have 10 companies, because now you have to spread out part of that $500,000 for one calendar year. So that's for tax reasons, it doesn't make sense.
Okay. No, perfect. I think that's really important, because I know there are also folks who are listening who maybe have incorporated already, and are considering creating these single purpose entities for their projects, and want to know if that's the right approach to take. So I agree with your advice that yeah, just evaluate more, you know, speak to professionals, and make that decision if it's necessary. Okay, so we can wrap up here. Are there any final thoughts, advice, um, messaging that you want to give to producers who are listening to this panel, and you know, are maybe considering, maybe have already incorporated, or are, you know, more established and they want to just, you know, participate in this conversation? Either way, I'm curious if you have thoughts and messaging for all levels, for producers at all levels that you can share. Okay,
I just have,
Ladan, yes.
I just have a quick note. As someone who was a comedian, like I'm not really, someone who always worked alone, I think what the biggest learning curve I realize is in this world is you're not alone. You have to work with different entities. So I think especially as artists, we're so used to saying, oh, I have all this creativity, all this magic I want to create. I don't need to connect with, you know, lawyers, accountant. I could do it all on my own. No, nothing's going to get greenlit. Nothing's going to be done. Your work is going to turn like what happened with Kafka. His books were just in his drawers before he died. So I feel like we have to, as artists and creatives, connect with the business, you know, sector as well if you want to make this work. Yeah.
Thanks, Ladan. Good points. John, what about you? Any messaging
Yeah,
thoughts?
yes, I agree with is it Ladin? Is that how you say your name?
Ladan.
Sorry, Ladan. Yeah, because I think we so focus on like on creativity. It's like let me create something. It's, you know, artists. It's almost like we're always on set, so we don't have time to think and to see who we have to connect. I'll give you an example. Like I just finished doing my series, but now I have to get that licenses. You see, it's almost like now I have to like make time to get in touch with someone who can help me with the process. And we always like find ourselves like, you know what, I'm just gonna go film. But I think sometimes you have to just like pause for a minute and see who is actually an expert on that, and trying to get the best advice from them, and versus just finding ourselves jumping into production. I'll give you an example. It's almost like I ended up getting this location, but I have to get insurance. It's like you can't just get a location when you have no insurance. Suppose someone actually come in my space and something happened, you know. So there's just like few things that I think as artists we have to also get advice from taxes. We have to get advice from lawyers, you know, because we don't know that information. We are not expert on that, you know. So just reach out, and then expect an email from me. I have a lot of questions. And Mewa, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn. I might connect with you. I do have some few questions. I might need your help and your expertise on that as well. You're on mute.
I'll just put my email in the chat because
Fantastic. Even better. Yeah. And Christina,
I'll do
too,
the
I know.
same thing, John. I'll do the
Okay,
same thing.
awesome.
Yeah.
I know you're in Vancouver, but expect an email from me as well. Yeah, awesome. That's all.
Thanks, John.
Mm.
John has just made several connections. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, Christina, Mira, what about you? Any advice, final thoughts, messaging to, yeah, to the folks that are listening to this conversation?
Sure. Yeah, don't be intimidated about interacting with a professional, right? You know, for the most part, we're here to help you. We're not here to make a quick buck off of you. I mean, you know, yes, there are some of those professionals out there, unfortunately. Like there are some of those people in everywhere. But do your research, talk to your friends who use lawyers and accountants, find out who they use, who they like. Go on their websites, talk to other people in the industry, right? Does that professional, does their firm have a good reputation, right? That's, you know, I can tell you that Christina's firm is a firm that we work with a lot, right? And they have a great reputation and they know what they're doing, and it's very, you know, very easy. They're very easy to work with, because it'll make your life easier. obviously cost is always a consideration, and you don't want to overspend on professional services when you're not ready. But hopefully if you have a good professional advisor, they will tell you what you should be spending on and what you shouldn't. They're not trying to oversell you on professional services that you don't need.
Yeah, I really agree with what Mira's saying. I would say, like, from our perspective, in this industry, it's such a niche industry. Like, do your research, find people that are working, like professionals that work with this industry, because to us, we have so much admiration for the arts and for what you all do. And it's not our specialty. So we are here to help you with the areas where you're not specialized, because, we appreciate that in our clients. So I think that, like, doing research and finding professionals that specifically work in the entertainment industry is really important.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, no, that's such a great way for us to conclude this engaging conversation. I really felt like I could keep asking you all questions, and to what John said earlier, we have access to Christina and Miro in this panel, and I'm sure as producers, Ladan, John, and myself, I think this access is so valuable. So, but thank you to to everyone on the panel for your time and for engaging with this conversation, and to everyone who's listening. I hope that some of the information that we shared today will support you through your journey as producers seeking, or even filmmakers seeking additional information to support your incorporation process, or if you're thinking about it, or if you've already incorporated and just needed to just hear from this panel. I think there's some really helpful information shared. So thank you, and we hope you enjoy the festival.
Thank you.